Welcome to Neuro Stories, the podcast that highlights the people behind neuroscience at the Walton Centre. Together, we'll lift the lid on the complex worlds of neurology, neurosurgery, and everything in between, hearing fascinating tales of the incredible staff and services carried out in the hospital every day.
Hi, morning Sam.
Morning, Gary.
Okay.
You okay?
Good, thanks. How are you?
God, this room is longer than I remember it to be.
My name's Gary Walsh. I'm a brain tumour therapy coordinator here at the Walton Centre.
Just break it down for me, what that means, what that job title is.
It's an allied health professional role. My background is a physiotherapist. These roles have just been created, so they've been funded for 2 years by Macmillan Cancer Support. So myself, with background as a physiotherapist, and my colleague who's an occupational therapist, and we've just started. Like you say, it's new. Basically, it's to look at the unmet therapy needs for the brain tumour patients, and that's across the whole sort of surgical pathway here at the Walton Centre.
Actually quite straightforward in that it's a role to sort of see where there's a need for extra therapy for these patients.
Yeah. So we already have therapists, a brilliant therapy teams on the wards for these patients. Obviously, that's kind of one part of the patient's journey. The patients often get referred into the Walton Centre. They then come in for kind of initial appointments with the consultant and the specialist nurses. So it's about trying to pick up the therapy sort of needs there and those kind of opportunities to input to the patients at that stage. And then the good part about these roles is that they can follow the patient through. So kind of that wraparound care. There will be overlap because there's therapists already in the Walton Centre who will be providing care. However, we can make sure that there's sort of continuity and kind of things get handed over. And then post as well, which is obviously important. So when patients then get hopefully discharged home, they then come back in for follow-up appointments. And that's another opportunity because we know with these types of patients, the brain tumour patients, sort of quite fast-paced really.
Yeah.
They get referred in quite quick. Things happen really quick. Symptoms can change really quickly. So great to have that kind of opportunity to review patients when's needed and provide things when it's needed, not trying to guess ahead of time or playing catch up.
Making sure that patient is supported throughout their journey, throughout the pathway here at the Walton Centre.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for you then personally, Gary, why did you go into physiotherapy?
It kind of just made sense when I was getting through sort of high school, and my interests were around biology and then like PE. The two just seemed to kind of like combine together, and I didn't think much more deeper than that. I did some work experience, which is quite classic. I had a kind of friend of the family who was a physio, spent some time with them, which was kind of the typical in a clinic, a world away from kind of what I do now. I kind of made my mind up there, although it feels strange, doesn't it? Because you're still so young making that decision.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't have seen myself working in neurology and neuro-oncology now, but kind of, that is where I started. And I think everyone probably thinks about physio when you start in physiotherapy thinking, I'll be running on the pitch, for England or whoever. But actually, as my sort of training progressed and the sort of things that you do see, I've gone down obviously a bit of a different route as well.
It's like that classic astronaut scenario, isn't it? When you're a kid, you want to grow up to be an astronaut, but actually, you go that way and you see something more interesting that you want to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, did you study here? Was it in Liverpool, or where did you study?
I actually studied in Preston at UCLan. It was a good course for physiotherapy. Yeah. Challenging degree, but but good. Long days and obviously a lot of clinical placements, which I really enjoyed. Really, I think that solidified me knowing that is what I wanted to do. I'd got to that kind of age where the academics, I was doing all that, but I kind of wanted to be out doing something as well, and the placements probably satisfied that kind of need for me.
I think a lot of people get to that point in their studies or their degree where they're like, I'm sick of looking at books and writing essays. I need to get out there. And so how did you go from UCLan to the Walton Centre?
So I probably took different route maybe to people typically would in physiotherapy. So I was going to touch on that before actually. So I was lucky enough in my last year of university to get a kind of internship placement, which was with a football club, with a professional football club. I did that kind of 2 days a week, flexibly alongside my studies and other placements. I kind of started there because when I finished my degree, there was work there. So the football club kept me on as a physiotherapist. That was my first job straight out of university when actually it was quite a challenging time for jobs as well. Back then in physiotherapy, very different to how it is now.
What year was this?
So 2010, I graduated.
Terrible year for trying to get a job.
Yeah.
The recession and everything.
Oh God, yeah. I had some friends who couldn't get a physiotherapy job for years.
But that's good. So name the football team.
Oh yeah, so that was Blackburn Rovers.
Right.
Proud to be affiliated with them.
And pitch side as well. So ready to look after the players.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So it was with the academy and reserve ages. So not much on TV or anything like that, but kind of typically where you start.
Yeah.
In those areas. So brilliant, very different to what I do now. And I think there was job satisfaction, nice rewards in sport. Actually, you didn't always maybe feel like you were maybe as valued as maybe you can be in a healthcare setting like this. The impact you maybe feel you can have. And although professional sports is a very competitive world and these teams have aspirations and obviously people are very passionate about it, if you compare it to maybe, the impact you can have with a patient in a setting like this, that was something that I kind of came to the understanding of, and I eventually realised, and that led me to around about a year in football and then actually coming into the NHS.
So how long have you been at the Walton Centre then now?
So I've been at the Walton Centre 13 years.
Great.
So, yeah.
So tell me about your career here then. What's that been like working with patients?
So I started here as a junior physiotherapist. I always think the Walton Centre is such a brilliant place to work, and we're so lucky to be in a hospital that has so much going on, so much skill. It's like a really brilliant place to come into, but then quite a challenging place. And I try and reassure new staff and students in the same way. I think it's so specialist, if you go onto the wards and district general hospitals, the wards are typically a cohort and it might be orthopaedics and again there's complexes within that, whereas in the Walton Centre, although we have cohorted wards, so many different types of surgery going on, so many different things that are great and different approaches. So actually trying to understand all that, obviously that has a massive impact on what a physiotherapist chooses to do. And how we approach the patient. So a lot of understanding needed with that. So a real learning curve. But that always felt okay and balanced with just a great team and great support.
With your relatively new role now, what's your biggest motivator then at work?
I'd say it's the team, I think. Just always inspired by how everyone else approaches things, everyone else's enthusiasm. Everyone's always trying to push things forward and do better for the patients. It never feels like things are static at the Walton Centre. There's a real, hunger to, just constantly improve, constantly evolve.
It can be quite hard. How do you deal with that?
You're right, it can be really hard. I think, unfortunately, a lot of tumours and a high proportion of tumours are higher grade tumours with worse prognosis. From a therapy point of view, the main thing really is trying to help them with their quality of life. And I suppose it's just putting the patient at the centre of it. So even though a diagnosis might be very life limiting and that prognosis might not be long, actually there's quality of life needs to be addressed, and there can still be a quality to living with cancer. And that's when you've got to be very focused on the patient themselves and what the patient's telling you, because that is so different for everyone. I think we've probably all got our own thoughts and kind of feelings about, like you say, mortality, and that's quite a personal thing, really. And I've always been really kind of sort of shocked by actually the resilience of people. I think you think people are going to be very distressed and distraught, and they can absolutely be that. However, if you're approaching it as anyone would in the team, but as a therapist, if you're approaching it, trying to understand where they are, their problems in that moment, what their priorities would be, and then talking about what you can offer, and trying to do that in a sensitive way at the right times, actually it gives people a bit of sense of empowerment in their own care, and that's the kind of way in for us. And I'm really kind of surprised by people's resilience a lot of the time, and actually you wonder, is now the right time to provide input? And we've been trying to sort of scope that out really and be there. And actually patients have been they've reacted really well to that.
And I suppose a lot of people don't really understand how physiotherapy can fit into a brain tumour patient's pathway. What does a physiotherapist do to help a patient, like the patients you're looking at, you're caring for?
Yeah. So as you say, and it's quite new, I think, really. Well, there's always been therapies and physiotherapy involved with these patients, especially in a ward setting, which we've had for a long time. And what we're looking at now is pre and post and along the surgical pathway, and that's new. And there's obvious things. So after a surgery and the way a tumour can present, it almost looks like someone's had a stroke or a bleed on the brain. The symptoms, just to sort of simplify it, can come across like that. So weakness down one side of the body, sensory changes, things like balance problems, coordination problems. There's those problems that are kind of a bit more obvious, I think, and that's always been picked up on by the wider services are aware that they're the physio's roles. What we're trying to look at now is there's milder symptoms of those, nuances of those that I say can be present to varying degrees around surgery time. They're the symptoms that these patients are presenting with in the first place. So, there's a role to pre-optimize patients, to try and address these concerns right at the start. And I say it happens quite quickly, patients being referred in and then surgery happening. So it's not always possible for lots of physiotherapy input, but actually assessing patients at the right time, providing smaller inputs, whether that's walking aids, splints, to keep people mobile and obviously that helps before any surgery, and living the way they want to live again before surgery. It's not that life just goes on hold and these people take to bed and lying there fretting about a surgery coming along. Obviously, I'm honing on physiotherapy as well. As I say, this role I'll flex a little bit more as a allied health professional as well. So giving advice that would be more wider therapy things like fatigue management, signposting patients and kind of social prescribing for advice around benefits and finance.
Okay, Gary, we're going to do the quick fire round. You're obviously aware of it. Are you ready?
Yes.
What would you be if you weren't a physiotherapist?
Maybe something in history. That was kind of another thing as well. I quite like history when I was kind of in school and college. World War II, morbid, isn't it? Something like economics. Become a bit more interested in kind of...
I mean, that's way over my head, Gary.
Probably me too, but I just like the idea of that.
What's your biggest hobby? Golfing,
I suppose. Any sport, really. I like to golf when I can. Not always well.
Favourite song?
Anything by Oasis. Champagne Supernova, maybe.
Fab, classic.
Yeah.
Favourite book?
I like Jack Reacher, Lee Child series. Yeah, it's not kind of, it's quite lowbrow, that, isn't it? It's, I just kind of love the way that I think maybe it's because of my work here, but kind of it's always kind of okay in the end. No matter what situation, it feels like I know
you can just follow it.
Yeah. It's like Bond, isn't it? It's always gonna be okay in the end. So I do like those.
Favourite film?
Saving Private Ryan.
Okay.
So
classic.
My World War II.
Yeah.
Love that film.
Favourite animal?
I like the tapirs.
Oh wow! The ones with the long tongues in the zoo.
Yeah, and the sort of long noses.
Why tapirs?
I don't know why I picked up on it. I think some of my friends will say my nose is quite extensive as well.
That's so bad.
So those, and then because it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So kind of, I feel like no one kind of, if you ever go to the zoo, no one's around the tapirs.
Yeah.
So I can go with the kids, like, we'll look at Daddy's favourite animal, and no one else is there.
Food you love?
Italian food.
Yeah.
Anything with there's plenty of flavour in.
Food you hate?
I think it's more the sort of texture of things, but kind of artichoke, kind of that.
Leafy.
Yeah, leafy, not textured.
Like tough.
Yeah, that's not for me.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Be kind to yourself. You'll get where you want to be eventually, and maybe it might be quite different to what you think at the time.
Best thing to happen to you?
My wife, and then got 2 lovely children.
Oh, lovely. And who's your hero?
I always feel like things are best when you're kind of like 10 years old. So like David Beckham, when I was 10, wanted to have the hairstyle, wanted to have the boots. was nowhere near. Well,
I mean, what was the hairstyle at the time when he was 10? Because he's changed his hair quite a
it
lot.
might have been the curtains, I think.
The curtains.
I had the, if you can, I'm ashamed to say that I think I tried.
They might be back. I've seen a few people with curtains recently.
I don't know if I could do it now.
And then finally, something very few people know about you.
I'm a history buff. I'd love to get across to the World War II battlefields, and my
In
wife
France.
would not want to go. It might be a solo trip. I'd love to do that, yeah.
Physiotherapy, I've always thought, has been quite a popular profession to get into. Is that still the case? Are you still seeing those students coming in wanting to be physiotherapists?
I think it's still popular, as you say. I know it's difficult to get on the course. I was applying and you were just happy to get a place anywhere almost. I think that's still the case now. It's good for the universities from like an income generating point of view as well. So the courses are still, there's still high demand for the courses. And we are seeing vacancy rates within the trusts, which actually, as you say, we're quite lucky. Physiotherapy is quite popular and the Walton Centre has got a very good reputation. So we tend to be able to recruit well for physiotherapy. The issue is, I think, it's more the retention. And I think people are understandably looking at other opportunities as well. So
people want to get that specialist experience maybe for a year or two and then they look elsewhere.
Yeah, we do see that. That's quite a traditional thing in physiotherapy where people will, a bit like junior doctors in their training world.
I suppose it mirrors the rotations that you go through when you're training, isn't it?
Yeah, in some ways. And then I think there seems to be a lot of more opportunities out there at the minute in terms of it is a bit easier to get hold of jobs and people are looking at places like New Zealand and Australia as well, which is exciting.
I see.
Yeah, exciting.
It's going further afield.
Yeah, so I think that's a bit of an issue for the profession as well. Obviously, the flip side of that is there's still plenty of students, so it's having enough staff in the hospitals to support them. You know, and obviously we were all there once upon a time, as the students. So we want to have enough staff to educate the students to a good level.
And how is the Walton Centre with that sort of educational side of things with students coming through? How good is that process?
Yeah, really good. Therapists in the team are very passionate about education. Vast majority of staff will be like a named educator for students and take them. There's a good culture of physiotherapists wanting to pass on, their knowledge, because as I say, we were all there at one stage, weren't we? So it's passing that on. So it's good. It's good.
Yeah. And where do you think physiotherapy is going? Like, has it changed much over your career?
I think it has changed, and I think healthcare has changed massive, hasn't it? Since 2010, 11, when I started and I graduated. Probably this is an example that the role I'm going into now, I think it's not as obvious, and I think there probably is still a bit of a culture. Treatment's really focused on the medical side of things, and obviously there's amazing medical work going on, and the patients are very much medical cases. But then the kind of holistic care around the patient, the kind of nurse specialists are brilliant, and they've long been in those teams and giving those patients that extra support, and the surgeons the extra support. And I suppose the added layer then is the physiotherapy and the therapies. And I think there's some great work going on around the country, really. I think it's a really good time now, actually, for physiotherapy and therapy in neuro-oncology. I think there's been some centres around the country and some teams that have done some really good groundwork. And now actually it's gaining a bit of momentum. We're really excited to be in our roles now because it feels like we can collaborate with them, and everyone's still very collaborative at this stage. It's not fully established. Physiotherapy's always been good at having a voice, and you probably know, Sam, that therapists will make themselves heard and definitely do that. And I think actually physiotherapists can add so much to so many different areas of healthcare and teams, and I think that's where it needs to go now. Kind of, I think the obvious areas are kind of covered, and those extra.
It's like, where else can we help and improve that patient care?
Yeah, definitely.
What's kind of on your bucket list for this role?
We're in the initial kind of scoping period, so it's getting our baseline kind of surveys, what the unmet need is, what the patients want, a role as well for kind of surveying the staff a little bit as well, and figuring out what the wider staff kind of really want from therapies as well for these patients, and then rolling it out. And I suppose that's what I'm most excited about. So
getting in
and getting face to face with the patients and getting hands on. This role I'm doing now, there's a lot more project management, which is very new to me. A real challenge. It's brilliant. I know it'll be sort of great skills for me going forwards. So I'm really trying to recognise that, but I can't help but want to sort of get on with the clinical side of things. And I think that's when you can see the tangible results. And we've had some kind of patients that we've picked up already as kind of pilots and sort of learning projects. And it's just brilliant. We've had some great feedback, and to see continuity being given to patients and the opportunities to, give them the right input at the right time, those sort of quick wins in a way, and make that difference, and potentially avoid them getting admitted to hospital too early, avoid them staying in hospital too long, and helping them, get home and do the things they want to do as well, not just be discharged from hospital safely, but not particularly functional, but functional, be able to go and live their lives. That's so important with the brain tumour. As I say, we're really lucky to get the funding from Macmillan for 2 years. Financially, things are tight, aren't they, within the whole system, and I feel really privileged, and with Anne as well, to get this opportunity, this funding, to be sort of trusted with the jobs, offered the jobs by sort of our therapy managers, and we've been so welcomed into the team by the surgeons, the specialist nurses, and then the wider trust as well. Me and Anne have worked here for a matter of years, and then you start something new and you suddenly realise you need to pull on lots of the team's experience. Everyone, from the likes of yourselves to business intelligence, informatics, the transformation teams, the sort of division right to the top as well, and everyone's just had an open door for us and kind of give us that time, and that feels really good.
Thanks for listening to Neuro Stories. You can listen to more episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can stay up to date with the latest news and events from the hospital on our social media channels, at the Walton Centre on Facebook and Instagram, and at Walton Centre on X. If you've got any feedback, email the communications team at wcft.communications@nhs.net. This podcast was recorded, edited and hosted by Sam Fleet from the Walton Centre's communications team.